Welcome, fellow seekers of truth and knowledge. Have you ever contemplated the profound mysteries of what lies beyond? In this video, we'll examine the captivating concepts of the afterlife and reincarnation, subjects that have piqued human curiosity and inspired inquiry for centuries. Together, we'll look at what this means for our relationships with those we love, for what happens in our lives, and for how we might redefine success. My name is Hayley Jones. If you're drawn to the unknown, eager to deepen your understanding and engage in insightful discussions, or simply curious about the possibilities that extend beyond this existence, you've found the ideal forum. It would be great if you could consider subscribing to my channel to become part of a growing community of inquisitive minds where we delve into topics that inspire, challenge, and broaden perspectives. Let's embark on this journey together beyond the veil of the ordinary. Imagine that we are all souls at our core. You, me, and everyone you know and love. Every living person that you know then is a soul in a body. Taking that further then, we are our souls and we are not our bodies. They're kind of on loan. I say kind of because when we don't need them anymore, we generally discard them and they integrate back into the cosmos rather than being loaned out to someone else. There is a concept that counters this idea in certain situations, but we can look at that in a later video. Okay, so what do we mean by soul? In one of my introductory videos, I talked about the idea of us all being a part of a source entity. The idea is that a very long time ago, this source entity separated itself into many parts, where each part is what we call a soul. The idea is that source did this because it wanted to experience all that is. So each of us is here to experience all that is, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, obviously it would be impossible to experience all that is in one human lifetime, which these days averages to around 80-85 years. But also, for each of us to just experience one lifetime wouldn't be enough to really achieve the goal that Source made for itself. As I'm sure you can relate, the older I get, the more I understand that there is so much more I could experience or know. Some of it I would like to experience, some of it I would really rather not experience, and some of it I'm pretty indifferent to. And thinking this way could be a problem too. If you just chose to have or create things in your life based on how you feel about them, you would likely only want to experience so-called nice or comfortable things, and this does not make for a well-rounded soul. I guess you could argue that if there were enough souls and we each experienced different things, then surely altogether we could experience everything and satisfy Source's quest. But this wouldn't be a very robust solution. While we might all experience different things that add up to everything, each of us just experiencing our set of things once or in one lifetime wouldn't really provide us with much wisdom. Again, at my age, I can look back and appreciate that I have learned things along the way, and I certainly feel more comfortable with myself and slightly wiser than I did when I was a child and a young adult. But I certainly haven't made sense of everything that's happened in my life. Nowhere near it. Experiencing something is not the same thing as making sense of it or resolving it or integrating it. Even experiencing the same thing several times in one lifetime is not necessarily enough to integrate it or learn the lesson. I'm sure you understand what I mean. We all have our stuff, the things we seem to go through over and over again, whether it's choosing similar partners who are not good for us, or constantly being late for everything, regardless of the consequences, or something in between. So having a whole bunch of souls group back together to reform Source after just one life each would, I think, create a rather dysfunctional entity. If our combined mission as the components of Source was to experience, know, and really embody everything, each of us would have to reach that state individually. So this means living many lives each. That is reincarnation. You could live many different lives as males, as females, non-binary, gay, straight, black, white, Asian, rich, poor, short lives and long lives. You could experience love, hate, kindness, violence, friendship, loneliness, excitement, boredom, and everything in between. If you experience all of these things often enough, you will come to a point of really knowing and understanding what it's all about. Love at its core, or at its simplest. You'll get to a point where you don't have to experience anymore. That is, no more reincarnating. It wouldn't add to your growth or understanding. So, if you're a soul and your physical body is on loan, and everyone else you know is also a soul in a body that is on loan, and you have all lived many, many lives as many, many different types of people in many, many different situations, then what does this mean for your earthly relationships with everyone you know in your current life? It means that they're not permanent. These relationships serve a purpose for one lifetime, and then when each of you dies, these specific relationships are no longer needed. Now, what I don't mean is that you will never see that soul again, or as you remember them to be in this life. I have no doubt that you will. There are certainly many stories of near-death experiences where people claim to be met by loved ones who have passed. My take on this is that when we pass, the souls of our loved ones who passed before us show themselves as we knew them in the life we've just left, an uncle, a mother, or even a child. But this is for your comfort, so that you see familiar faces while you adjust to no longer being in the physical world and start remembering what the afterlife is all about. Once you've settled a little into the afterlife, I would think that you would start to see the wholeness of your relationships with these souls. You would start to recall all of the incarnations that you've been in with each of them. You may even discover that a person you considered your worst enemy in your current life is one of your closest allies in the spirit world. I know this is a difficult one to conceive of, and we can look at that further in a later video. You may also come to realize, for example, that the person who was your mother in this life was your son in the life previous to that, a good friend in another, your husband in another life, and the village baker whom you only saw on Tuesdays in yet another. As you truly understand that you've had myriad relationships with the souls you've encountered in your current life, you'll be able to let go of your attachments, recognizing that they're unnecessary. So what if this is how things work, from a very basic point of view at least? I see that people suffer terribly when a loved one dies, especially when it is unexpected, or when the person is considered too young to die, or when a relationship ends when it wasn't their choice to end it. People need to grieve, of course they do. But I see that at least some of the suffering comes from unmet expectations and attachments to particular outcomes or ideals. And yes, I'm absolutely speaking from personal experience as well. So if we were able to understand now in this lifetime that the people we form relationships with are playing a very temporary part, as are we, if we could truly embrace this understanding, I believe that this could transform how we all look at and behave in the world, and thereby transform the world itself. It's not that we won't love people or care for them. We won't abandon our children or not want the best for them. That would go against everything we're talking about. But we will have a different understanding of what the best for them is. Our expectations won't be so rigid. And so when someone passes young or a relationship ends, we will be able to understand this within the bigger picture. And rather than only think how sad it is, we'll be better able to reflect on the values of such a thing happening. We'll be able to see what we formerly would have considered a devastating incident as a really valuable part of a much bigger picture. For myself, I've had a few romantic relationships over my lifetime. I have broken some hearts, and I've also had my heart broken. Yes, more than once. I can now look back at those relationships, and instead of always picking on the certain incidents or scenarios where I felt hard done by, I can see each as a whole package and see how important each of them was to my growth. Perhaps not surprisingly, I can see that the most difficult relationships helped me to grow the most. I try to look back and thank those souls for joining me in this life, understanding that I was a part of choosing to have those relationships and the paths they took. I'm not saying I don't have moments of bitterness or resentment. Of course I do. I'm human. But when I can remind myself to step back and see the bigger picture, I can see them in a kinder light for both myself and the other soul. And it's the same when people I've known have passed. I am sad, of course, but not for them. I believe it was the right time for them to go, and that they had in fact chosen when to go and how. I believe they are in a better place, that they have a much better understanding of where they fit into the greater scheme of things and why things panned out as they did in their life, and how much hand they had in choosing things that happened in their life. I do believe they've gone home, and I do believe I'll see them again, just in a different setting. And when that happens, I will almost certainly come to a completely different view and understanding of my relationship with them. If we all lived our lives with this view, I believe the world would be a much more harmonious place. We would understand that money and climbing the corporate ladder are not the be-all and end-all. Success would be measured with respect to our progress towards becoming wise enough to go back to source permanently. This would mean we would understand the value, the necessity even, of being more cooperative, of building others up, rather than knocking them down on our way to some randomly defined top. Why is having a job that you work at for 60 hours a week, earning a high six-figure salary, but never having the time to see your family and friends considered successful? Success would be measured, or understood at least, as the amount of compassion we have for others, how we care for others, and not just other humans, but all of nature, plants, animals, and minerals. Life would have a slower, more considered pace. We would naturally stop and smell the roses as a matter of course, and seek out and truly cherish moments of connection with others, without expectations or strings attached. We would also be less judgment of situations as good or bad, understanding that each situation has its own value, with lessons and opportunities for growth. We would all understand that looking after the more vulnerable members of our society is everyone's responsibility. Our approach would be more that of a village than a cutthroat race to some arbitrarily defined top.